This is The Road Ahead, Chapter 6, Celebration. It was dark outside, but no one dared to fall asleep. They probably couldn't if they tried. It didn't matter that the towering structure of the western branch was far in the distance. Roman swore he could still feel the thundering footsteps of boots. He clutched the stolen file to his chest like a newborn child. If it were possible to hear the heartbeats of everyone inside the car, they would have all had to be pulsing 100 miles a minute. The road they took was slim, less of a road and more of a side route. There were no streetlights where they were going, but as Roman met Remus's eyes, recognition crossed his twin's face. At least they were going somewhere familiar. Excited murmurs filled the car, celebratory of a successful venture. That didn't stop Roman from looking back every few seconds. Call it paranoia, but he feared any moment that the authorities would appear and tear everything to pieces. Fortunately, no one ever popped out of the shadows, nor were there any signs of someone following them. A dark outline was caught in the headlights. As they rolled closer, the form was revealed to be a small house, surrounded by fields and a pond. The middle of nowhere in Roman's terms. Aside from the rare road trip, he lived in cities and bustling campuses his whole life. Janice brought the car to a stop and nearly ran up to the front porch. There was a smile on his face, one of comfort and nostalgia. The others followed at a reasonable pace, and Remus bent underneath the porch to retrieve a small gnome. Logan and Patton's faces both shone with confusion, and Roman had no doubt he looked the same. Remus didn't offer it any attention. He brought the gnome up to where Janice stood and shook it until something small dropped onto the porch. It was a brass key, and when inserted into the lock, the door opened. Clouds of dust drifted up from the floorboards when they stepped inside. The floor creaked under their weight, though when Janice flicked on a light switch, electricity remarkably still flowed through the house. They took in the space. It was small, sporting a living room, kitchen, and what looked to be 2 bedrooms and a bath upstairs. Remus wasn't hesitant to make himself at home, and dove towards the old leather couch in the center of the room.
Man, I missed Fort Darkside.
He folded his arms behind his head with a grin. Roman raised a brow. Fort Darkside? Janice came up with the name while we were all drunk. Virgil smirked, and Janice shot him a glare. It's kind of fitting, actually. It's not as if everyone else sees us as the good guys, so we operate from the shadows, light hidden in darkness. Yes, I was totally thinking all of that while 3 glasses deep in my sorrows. Janice shrugged off his coat and placed it on a hook beside the door. Now, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate if you all could hand over your files. I wouldn't want them to be lost in our celebrations. He held his hand out. The tightness in his shoulders seemed to dissipate for every manila folder that was placed on the palm of his hand. Janice flashed a small smile once he had gathered everything. It was different from the one he usually carried, merely a quirk of the lips, but with all the more difference. Relaxed and fun, rather than the sly smirk that Roman couldn't help but think was a facade. Roman would see that smile again someday if he had anything to do about it. He was pulled to the living room by the bright lights that shone from the television Remus had flicked on. Besides Janice, everyone else had gotten the same idea. Somehow, Virgil had managed to coax Remus off of the small couch, and was settled atop the armrest with his legs swinging over the edge. Patton was curled up against the other side. He looked as if he was trying to take up as little space as possible. Remus occupied the floor, and Roman was content to join him. Unlike Remus's sprawled position, he opted to sit crisscross. Off to his left, Logan had pulled his knees close to his chest. observing the whole room in silence.
I say we kick off the festivities with something good. The DVD drawer it is.
He shuffled over to a wooden drawer beneath the television. It groaned on its hinges as Remus yanked it open to reveal a collection of slim cases. All sported titles dating at least 10 years prior, likely coming from the bargain bucket at some local store. Remus's finger traced along the spines, making a light thunk every time he passed over a cover. Just before he reached the end of the drawer, his hand halted, and with an excited gasp, he retrieved his bounty.
Yes! It's a good thing we didn't give this beauty away.
He blew onto the plastic and sent dust flying off the cover. Roman sneezed, then leveled a glare at Remus. He failed to notice the way Logan's eyes lit up in recognition until he caught his friend reaching for the DVD. Is that the special extended version of Nature in the Universe? Remus perked up.
Yeah, it is.
He turned the case over, and his grin spread as he read off the description.
The only edition that holds episode 53 of season 5. The greatest
of the animal kingdom. Logan's eyes were wide as saucers. I can't believe you have it. I've searched for a copy for ages. The library wouldn't let me buy it from their archives, no matter how much I asked. He glanced hesitantly at Remus, who understood and happily handed over the DVD. Logan looked about ready to explode. He brushed his finger along the title as if attempting to observe every word on the cover. This is incredible. It even has the regal horned lizard bit.
Darn right it does. It even shows the blood shooting from its eyes. Best show ever.
Logan handed the DVD back, and Remus proceeded to place it in the player, flicking the TV on with the flick of a remote. A series of whirs and beeps surfaced as the documentary came to life. Roman was shocked to see his brother just as starry-eyed as his friend. He hadn't known such a thing existed, though, to be fair, he didn't know many things about Remus anymore. The screen erupted in a whirl of colors and shapes, and eventually settled on an image of a desert landscape. The low voice of the narrator arose, signaling the start of the documentary. Remus, I didn't realize you were one for such informative programs.
Well, it's fun to learn things when they discuss the people you share it with.
He turned to Virgil, whose face scrunched up in what had to be an assortment of horrid memories. Fascinating. Would you be opposed to trading facts? The expression that emerged on Remus's face was a mixture between shock and excitement. He frantically nodded, and Roman took his eagerness as his sign to leave. He was all for learning, though not when it included all the twisted facts Logan and his brother had no doubt gathered in the past years. He set off for the kitchen, disappearing behind the threshold. While Logan and Remus bonded through frighteningly weird information, Patton remained tucked in the far end of the couch. Though his eyes were open, all he could see was red. Red, on the key card, sticking to the tips of Virgil's fingers as he opened the archive door. Red, on the floor, smeared from rushed footsteps. Red, on the tip of his weapon. Not his. He had only found it. Self-defense. He did what he had to. Only what he had to. Patton shivered. He could still hear the crack of the weapon against another human being, the way their body dropped to the floor like a flour sack, alive, but still wounded. Seeing the rise and fall to their chest afterwards didn't change the fact that Patton had still hurt another. He was supposed to be the sweet one. That's what everyone said, and he embraced it. Patton liked being kind. A strict moral code was what he used to reassure himself. Though the world could be bad, he had a chance to be the bit of good amidst the frightening. until he swung that weapon. Crack. The documentary in the background was a distant memory to which he barely acknowledged. He was too focused on his cuticles, picking at the skin as if he could trade the pain for all that he'd caused. Patton winced as he went too far and wiped the crimson bead that had started to form on his shirt. Careful. The voice was low, emerging much closer than Patton thought it would be. He jumped, and a hand emerged to steady him. Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. Oh, it's all right. I just got a bit lost in thought. Is that why your cuticles are facing the wrath of your nails? Virgil pointed to the smeared mess around his fingertips. Red. Patton pulled away, and an embarrassed blush quickly spread across his face. I'm sorry, I find it hard to feel any sort of victory when I had to hurt people in the process. It's like... He groaned, dragging his hands down his face. I want to be happy. I want to feel good, but how could I deserve such a thing after what I did? Virgil was silent for a moment, considering. His hands hovered over Patton's own as if he wished to spare them from facing more damage. His own were covered in an array of scratches, though that had been from the fight. Patton spotted a bruise forming on Virgil's temple where he had been struck with the guard's weapon. Of all the reassurances Virgil could have offered at that moment, Patton was surprised when he said, Yeah, I get that. He met Virgil's eyes with a look of confusion. What? It's hard, knowing that there are sacrifices you have to make for the greater good. A low sigh escaped Virgil's lips. Patton could tell countless memories were flowing through Virgil's head at that moment. There was one time, he started with a wistful smile, on my first ever mission, where I had nearly gotten away before there was a blade pointed at my throat. The only way I could have escaped was by incapacitating that person, though I still flinched when I heard him hit the ground. Patton was quiet. Did you? No, he's still alive. But it didn't change the fact that I had to break his foot to get away. Remus and Janice had to try for hours to get me to stop shaking. Wow, Patton breathed. He didn't realize someone so seemingly tough could have broken down so easily. A new layer of respect for the man beside him emerged, and Patton gently laid a hand on his shoulder. For what it's worth, I think it's really brave that you tried to protect me, when I wasn't even willing to protect myself. I just stood there while you fought alone like a coward. But you stood up when it mattered most. A gentle smile emerged on Virgil's face. It was odd, seeing him so kind when normally he was a mix of sarcasm and stress. And that's just as brave as anything. I guess so. He trailed off. An echidna had appeared on the screen. It bobbled around happily to the melody of the narrator's voice. Peaceful. That's all Patton wanted to be. Do you still get afraid? He asked. Does it ever get to you? Virgil opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He sat in silence, seconds of careful thought over the right words, the right memories. It will get easier. That wasn't my question. I know. Is it okay to stew in the unknown for a bit? From the look on his face, Patton knew Virgil would give a real answer if he really wanted him to. But it wasn't fair to push him so far. Patton was sure he knew the answer anyways, so he leaned back into the cushions and allowed himself to uncurl from the corner. Yeah, we did do something pretty incredible after all. And I guess that's what matters. We made it out safe, and with the evidence we were looking for."
"Exactly," Virgil said. "And it's all right to feel a little guilty, but also try to remember what truly matters in here." He placed a finger over Patton's heart, and his breath hitched at the touch. Patton could only imagine his face was redder than a summer rose. "I know what it's like to have to balance all the worries that your mind screams at you." There was understanding in his eyes, as if he could read Patton's every thought. "Just try and remember that no matter where your thoughts pull you, there will always be someone to help bring you back." The words sunk into Patton's mind. They swirled like leaves in a dark forest, guiding, leading, pulling him higher towards the sun. He'd protected those he loved, and no matter the cost, seeing another safe had been the true good in the end. A deep breath surfaced from his restless bones. Patton inched closer to Virgil so that there was but a breath between their faces. His eyes were wide, questioning as he spoke in a voice almost inaudible. "If I was being pulled down, would you bring me back?" A pause, then, "Yeah, of course." Patton surged forward before Virgil could finish and wrapped his arms tight around his chest. Virgil yelped in surprise, but after a moment returned the gesture. He allowed Patton to rest his head on his shoulder. Softly, he heard him mutter against his shirt, "Thank you." Virgil nodded, and it was in his arms that Patton finally realized something. A victory didn't have to be graced with loud cheers and shimmering smiles. A moral code didn't define what he gained in the end. Yes, the image of the fight was still conscious in his mind, but a new thought was tethered to the memory, one of the relief on Virgil's face when the last guard fell. They thought that in that moment, he had saved them both from what could have been the end. With a deep breath, Patton allowed himself to sink deeper into Virgil's arms. This was his celebration. This was the success of helping those who needed it. Patton Oriole may have had a strict moral code, but there are some people that are just worth fighting for. This has been Chapter 6 of The Road Ahead. Thank you so very much for listening, and I will see you next time for Chapter 7.